Hello and welcome to Just Onside. I'm your host for today's episode, Uwais Ahmed. I'm joined by the man, well, as we head into the big Champions League final week, I'm joined by the man who has been reminiscing 22 years and 1 month to the date of Leeds' semi-final exit at the hands of Valencia in 2001. How are you? Have you been thinking about that game? I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have.
You knew I weren't thinking about it. I'd completely forgot about it. But now that you bring it up, happy days. All good, my friend. All good.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Normally on the Just Onside podcast, we'd be joined by Badge. Although he wasn't present on the last one, we were hoping he could make this one. But he's taking this paternity leave a bit too seriously. What do you think?
He's changing nappies as we speak, I think. He's got his hands full, quite literally.
Quite literally. Anyway, lovely way to... Yes, I'm just trying to enjoy my cup of tea. Yeah, you right. Anyway, we move on, but let's dive in. There's a lot to get into, Ayub, this week. Not least yesterday's game, and obviously the big one on Saturday. Just before we do, if you haven't already, please give the channel a subscribe, give the episode a like, drop a comment, and hit that bell to be notified of future content. Right, let's dive straight into it, Ayub. We've got lots to get into. Again, we're probably going to cover the West Ham Europa Conference League final that was played yesterday in Prague. We're recording this on Thursday evening. We'll touch on Zlatan Ibrahimovic retiring from professional football, and then obviously finishing off with the big preview for the Champions League final in Istanbul on Saturday night. So let's start off with the Europa Conference League final. Obviously, an English team participating in the final there, West Ham against Fiorentina. West Ham emerging 2-1 winners in what was a decent game to watch. Give me your thoughts. What do you think about the game in general? Obviously, West Ham winning a European trophy, incredible scenes there at the end as well. What were your overriding thoughts on West Ham's European trophy there?
I agree. It was a decent game. Bereft of quality, though. Really, I don't think it was high quality. And you probably could understand that it's in terms of European tournaments, European competition. It's the sort of, I suppose, the junior partner. So the quality wasn't quite there, but thoroughly enjoyable game. A tight game, a good game in the sense that I suppose it was both teams were in it. I thought Fiorentina were the better footballing side. But certainly in terms of endeavour, certainly Moises got the players playing for the shirt. They played, they worked really, really hard. First goal was it was a penalty, wasn't it? Was it a penalty? Yeah. I mean, it was again when I looked at that, it was one of these where his arms raised, but it's if you looked at the actual when he actually handled the ball, his hand couldn't really go anywhere else because the body was in the way, and it was almost as if it was, I suppose, the only position that his hand could get to was that position. So again, it's one of those where you look at the decision, you think, it's harsh, but by the letter of the law, it had to be. But given it was a good penalty was taken, decent equaliser. In fact, an excellent equaliser. I thought the flick on first touch, moving it to his right foot, bang in. Excellent. I thought once it was 1-1, I thought there was only going to be one winner. I thought it was going to be Fiorentina, but I think the goal that Bowen scored to win the game almost optimized it, because it really, Bowen isn't the quickest of strikers or quickest of attacking players, but it never seemed as if the defender was going to catch him. I think the attempt at playing offside, I think it's the captain who played them onside, but it was just it was symptomatic of the standard, because you'd expect a team that is at a high level to be pretty much in control. When they're playing offside, you'd expect them to play offside and have a nice tight line. So, but wonderful scenes at the end, though. I think in terms of English football, anytime there's an English team playing in Europe, there's only one team that I'm obviously going to back. It's the English team. Tremendously pleased for David Moyes. He's one of, I suppose, the old guard. He's been managing for God knows how many years. I read a little stat somewhere that he's managed over 1,000 games and this is his first, I think, trophy. Tremendous. Uh, uh, I suppose joy for David Moyes. His old man was there as well, it must have been really good. But a result that I suppose for English football it's great. Wasn't the best of games in terms of a spectacle, but in terms of a result, I was absolutely delighted for West Ham. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think with the standard was the standard. You're right. It's the third European competition, right? Yeah, after the Champions League and the Europa League in terms of order. And if you look at the two teams that contested the game, Fiorentina and West Ham, Fiorentina finished 34 points behind the champions of Serie A, Napoli, and West Ham were skirting relegation for at least 4/5 of this season, finishing 49 points behind Manchester City. So it puts into context that this is ultimately a third tier European competition. And you're right, the quality in the final, you would imagine, will be very much different in the Champions League final played on Saturday night. So you're absolutely right. I think it is what it is. You accept it for what it is. I think West Ham have acquitted themselves incredibly well in this competition. They've won 12 out of 13 games in the competition. It gave them something to strive for during those difficult times when they were still fighting for relegation. There would have been a school of thought, you would have thought, that maybe it's just useful just to get knocked out of those competitions to focus on Premier League. There would be such a narrative that would have been the case. But I think some of those wins and some of those performances has also helped certain key players get into a little bit of form as well, not least someone like Paqueta, who seemed to definitely improve as the season went on. But going to the game itself, I do want to pick up your get your views on a few points, and I want to take them quickly in order if we can. Just because it was a final, it was a showpiece, so I think it's incumbent upon us to touch on it. I think you had obviously at 0-0 in the first half. Again, a game that was kind of dominated by Fiorentina for the most part in terms of possession, in terms of moving it around. Amrabat was in good control in that deep line midfield position. Obviously, I think it's their captain, Biragi. I think it was Cristiano Biragi who was who was looking to take the corner when some West Ham fans, and I think it's important to say that some West Ham fans were throwing plastic pint cups and vape pens and what have you. And I thought, just to give you my quick views on that, I actually thought some of the commentary on the BT Sport coverage, in my opinion, was nowhere near harsh enough. They had Robbie Savage and I think Don Hutchinson on colour commentary, and they spoke about how some of the West Ham fans needed to calm down. I think they needed to do more than calm down. I think if that was the other way around, I can imagine what some of the rhetoric and some of the words that would have been used. Rightly so. So I think I was a little, I want to say disappointed. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Who cares what a commentator says? But I do feel that I mean, they actually injured a player. It's not just throwing cups where it's just whistled by his ears. They've obviously injured the player, blood streaming from the back of his head. What were your thoughts on that ugly incident? I mean, again, I thought there should have been stronger condemnation from the commentators, but that was, I thought, quite an ugly incident. I thought handled incredibly well by the referee, B, the Fiorentina players. I thought they didn't make too much of it. They could have. A players actually, been cut, and there was a lot of blood.
Yeah.
And then obviously Declan Rice as well. Not least, kind of speaking to the Fiorentina players to say, look, yeah, understood. I'll try and get the West Ham fans to calm down. But I thought the situation was handled well by the players. But quite an ugly incident, I thought.
It was. You're absolutely right, because I mean, you saw the blood streaming from the back of the head, and if you think that if it was the other way around and it struck him in the eye, because obviously if the damage is, I mean, it's hurled from a reasonable distance, so the impact is going to be quite powerful. So I think there should be consequences. That just cannot be accepted. You're absolutely right, though. I think in terms of how the referee and how the players managed the situation, it could have escalated. It could have been. I mean, the Fiorentina players maybe could have perhaps made more of it.
Yeah.
But it was. I think everybody acted with a lot of common sense. So I think that the situation, I think, de-escalated because of the referee and the players. But it's an ugly incident. It's an incident I do not like to see. Maybe if it's plastic bottles, but even then, it's still perhaps. If it catches you in the corner of the eye or in the eye, maybe it can cause a little bit of damage. So, fans throwing things has been quite common practice. But when you start throwing objects which are hard, I think the club has to be punished. And I hope the European bodies punish West Ham with I think the usual penalty seems to be a game behind closed doors, and I think that certainly has to happen because you cannot accept or in any way allow fans who do this to get away with it. I suppose it penalises many of the fans who perhaps were well behaved, but ultimately there has to be some sort of consequences. So a very, very unpleasant incident. And but you're absolutely right. I think the way that it was managed, handled, superb. I think kudos to everybody involved for calming a possibly inflammatory situation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was the key. And I was really pleased that when Biraji then proceeded to take the corner, because he actually insisted on taking the corner there afterwards. Luckily, there were no kind of a second wave of objects being thrown, which can often happen because unfortunately you do have people of ignorance doing things that they shouldn't be. I don't understand what crosses your mind to want to throw something at a footballer. I mean, surely you've got to carry your emotions in check a lot better than that. Anyway, we move on. In the obviously second half, you mentioned about the handball. I'm in agreement with you, but I just cannot see how this is a penalty. I mean, from the throw, I think it's come from a long throw. Jared Bowen's then taken it wonderfully well, I think, just on the top of his chest, cushioned it into his path, ready to perhaps unleash a shot from what would have been still a relatively tight angle. It looks as though like the players put his hand in an area where it shouldn't be and therefore perhaps in an unnatural position. But if you look at how fast it happens, what he's looking to do is close the position or the gap between him and Jared Bowen, and it's Biraji again. And I just think his hands ended up in that place. I still think it's quite a natural position to be in. Your hands are not always when you're running, or whether you do a little jump or a little skip or whatever it might be, all the various different kind of dynamic positions that you take up on a football pitch, they're never just stuck to your sides. There's always a little bit, and his hands have come up a little bit, and the proximity. And I agree with you in terms of the letter of the law and what have you, but for me, it was a really, really poor decision. I cannot give that as a penalty. There's just no way. Regardless of whether it's a cup final or even a game that doesn't matter, I think it's incredibly unfair. So I didn't think it was. Ben Rama puts the penalty away. You mentioned about the equaliser pretty much immediately afterwards, a few minutes later. Wonderful goal. Amrabat onto Gonzalez, who won an incredible header, I must say. Kind of jumping up incredibly high, and Bonaventura, the way he took that goal, one touch, two touch, with a little bit of a volley, kind of in an awkward position, just to kind of slot it beautifully. I mean, that was a wonderfully kind of a real difficult goal to score, technically speaking. So incredible equaliser, and then to your point, the game's drifting, not much quality in it. If anything, Fiorentina perhaps pushing a little, perhaps to get the winner, but again, long range pops, which Areola I think dealt with incredibly well. I think the goal is in some ways, I think it's interesting because I think Bowen is a player who I do think he's a little above West Ham's level. I think he's a really good player, and I think he at some point could make the move up. But Paqueta, in terms of his first touch delivery, and then so his first touch is a stop, and then second touch bang. And for any kind of young amateur footballers watching it, it's the speed at which he does it. That's the key. It's the minimal backlift. If he just does a very natural backlift there, he's probably just drifting offside. It's the fact that and De Bruyne's probably the best master at this. It's like a one touch, a trap, bang, low backlift through. They see things quicker than others see things. So incredible through ball. I think the goalkeeper's made it a little easy coming out. Bowen looked like he was a little bit gassed, as I would say, and just flagging a little. He's even hit the ball whilst he's kind of ended up on the floor late in the game, 90th minute. I just think the keeper's come out, and therefore the strikes obviously hit his shins or knee area, and then kind of, it wasn't a great finish per se, but I think the goalkeeper's made his mind up by coming out so fast. Defenders seem to be making up yards on him, so I would have probably stayed a little bit on my line and forced Bowen to beat me from 20 yards or 18 yards. But regardless, wonderful scenes. Moyes running onto the pitch, and that's what we love about this game. That was for me the takeaway. Moyes running Jose Mourinho-esque down the touchline, just full of joy, ecstasy, fans coming onto the pitch. Fine, we don't really want to see it, but just pure joy and elation. All the fans kind of, all the support players jumping on top of one another. It is what last minute goals are about, and Jared Bowen spoke about that to BT Sport. But look, incredible win for West Ham, unbelievable. Great to see the celebrations, fantastic. There were a lot of subplots going into that game. Will that be David Moyes' last game at West Ham? Perhaps, perhaps not. Let's see. Will it be Declan Rice's last game? What's your thoughts on that? You may have caught David Sullivan's comments after the game. He's confirmed that Declan Rice will leave. What's your thoughts on that situation?
No, irrespective of the result, that was always going to be the case. I think he served his time at West Ham, and it's time for the next move, the next big move. And he deserves it. I think he's a wonderful professional. Certainly from whenever you watch an interview, he seems to be really passionate about the game. He's got a lot of respect for the game. I don't know whether you watched the video once, or I'm not sure exactly what the program was, but he's got a lot of the midfielders that he admires, their shirts in his house. So I love that. I love that it's not just a game. It's more than that. I won't quite sort of say he's a historian of the game, but he appreciates football. He appreciates the position he plays in, and he's got a great deal of reverence for those who have played in his position. So I love the guy, and I think he deserves a move to a big club. As to which club he goes to, I suppose that's anybody's guess. But he'll have plenty of takers. I think he's a top quality player. I think any side in world football will be enhanced by having Declan Rice. And I'm talking about any side in the world. I'm talking about even Real Madrid, sides like that. So I hope he does well, which he will do. Moisey, I don't know. I mean, how can it even be considered that it may be his last game? He's achieved something that's not happened at West Ham for what, 40 years? He's won a trophy. So if he leaves, obviously, I suppose he leaves. But I'd be amazed as to why he would even contemplate sort of wanting to finish. He's had a indifferent sort of time, but when you're a coach of West Ham, I presume staying in the Premier League is perhaps the prerequisite. But then if you can win a pot, I mean, he's done something that the Spurs haven't done for was it 30, 40 years? I can't see him leaving. I think he'll stay at West Ham. He's been there for a few years now. The feel good factor must be incredible. I think Moisey will stay, but Rice is definitely going. I mean, it will be an unbelievable miracle if he stayed. But I just don't see it happening at all.
Yeah, just circling back to your comment about the program, Declan Rice, that you were talking about, where he's got all of his shirts. Yeah, I remember the show. Yaya Toure comes in, and his reaction to Yaya Toure.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
It's a really nice reaction, because he's just overwhelmed by the fact that, and he talks about how he was his hero as well. But yeah, that was a nice little scene that I remember watching it. Yeah, no, look, Declan Rice spoke well after the game, incredibly well, and you're right. Look, he's one of two automatic starters for England. Probably one of three now, maybe, actually, come to think of it, in Harry Kane, Declan Rice, and Jude Bellingham. I think those three start, and then it's obviously any other eight that obviously Southgate. I think there's other kind of competition for places, but I think those three are kind of dead certs to start. Kind of, I say form pending, but they'll be in form, and they'll play for Gareth Southgate for the next couple of years for sure. Incredible player, dealt with this whole kind of rumours and speculation in the right way, like a proper professional. David Sullivan obviously confirmed today that there will be bids coming in as early as today. Obviously, Arsenal, Bayern Munich, Chelsea, even Manchester United, all interested in his services. Wonderful age. He's high up in some of the statistics when it comes to key statistics in terms of runs, recoveries, etc. David Sullivan confirmed that they offered him £200,000 a week 18 months ago, and he rejected it. So he's lost a fair bit as well, actually, and lost wages, but that's all with a view to leaving this summer, which no doubt, I believe you're right, he will. Moyes, let's see, I think there were some rumours. But I mean, look, maybe at his maybe he just thinks he's come to the end of his cycle in terms of at West Ham, and perhaps he just wants to take some time out, similar to the Napoli manager. There are times when maybe it's all a little much, and regardless, and you're trying to avoid burnout and what have you, and it might be just a little too much. You might not need the hassle. So I think, look, regardless, but amazing night for West Ham. I think yeah, just to see the scenes, it's lovely. It was actually quite nice for what is quite a historic club in England,
Yeah, yeah.
especially. So to see them win a trophy was quite magical. So well done to them. Moving on, Ayub, if we may, we were going to, like I said, focus on the Champions League preview, but obviously a topic that you were quite keen to cover, and I agree with you. It was the retirement for Zlatan Ibrahimovic that took place this week. Obviously, an incredible player of our time. I think he had a career that spanned 24 years. What will be your kind of lasting thoughts on Ibra, as he was known, and in terms of obviously the clubs that he's played for, and I guess his overall legacy?
Uh, I've mentioned it to a few people that sometimes I wouldn't say unfortunate, but maybe it's just the timing. To be in the same time as Messi and Ronaldo perhaps always makes it difficult to perhaps have the accolades, the respect, or I suppose the kudos. He's certainly well revered, so I don't think there's any question. I don't think anybody underestimates the ability of the man, but I think, been an outstanding footballer. I think he's a great footballer. I think he's one of the world greats. Certainly, I mean, if you play the game for 24 years, there is something about that. There is a durability. If you look at his physique, he's a magnificent specimen of a man. I mean, he really is. I mean, 6'5", a beast, athletic, not blessed with tremendous pace, but quick enough. And he's just, I mean, in terms of charisma, is there a more charismatic character than the big man himself, Ibrahimovic? I think he's outstanding. I've been a massive fan. And what he's done, which I always admire, is that he's played in many countries. He's played for big clubs in Italy, in Spain, in Holland. He's played for Ajax as well, quite early doors in his career.
Hmm.
But the big one, certainly for me, was I always want, especially in recent times when the Premier League is considered to be the best league in the world, that I always like players that perhaps are classified as great players to test themselves in the best league in the world. Now, he came when he was mid-30s, so he's certainly not at his peak. I won't sort of say he was too far off his peak because he's somebody that kept himself in
Hmm.
fantastic shape, but he was outstanding. When I saw him at Manchester United, I just thought this man is not far off his peak, but I'd love to have seen him at his peak. So I think he's a character that I think deserves a tremendous amount of respect. I wouldn't quite sort of say he's at Ronaldo and Messi status, but he's not far off. He's not far off. I think he's won about 10 or 11 titles. The one thing perhaps that he's missing from his CV, he's never won the Champions League, it's unbelievable to imagine that this player who's played for the biggest clubs in the world just wasn't at the club at the right time. But an unbelievable player, an unbelievable striker. For a guy of, I mean, I talked about his height, his size, his physicality. He was incredible in terms of athleticism. And he's what I always used to admire about Ibrahimovic was he could score goals from everywhere. I mean, I think I remember a goal against England that he scored overhead kick just from outside the box. Fantastic. I mean, again, it's incredible. But what he was wonderful at is a lot of times they talk about strikers getting yourself into a position, moving into space, running onto the ball. What he was unbelievably good at was he would stop. He'd be in the box running, he'd stop, and he'd create space because the defender would carry on running. He'd have maybe 2 yards of space, bang, ball in the back of the net. He was very clever, extremely intelligent. I mean, he's an intelligent man, which translated itself onto the pitch because he was so clever. He could drop deep. He was lethal in the box. He was great in the air. Wonderful feet. Just a complete football player. It's if I could be somebody, it would be Ibrahimovic. He was just everything he embodied was fantastic because I loved his character as well. I loved his arrogance. I watched a documentary on Ibrahimovic once, and in his house, he's got a picture of his bare feet, and they're horrible. They are an absolute mess. But he's got a big, massive picture of his feet. And again, this says a lot about the character, because the reason he said that he's got a picture of his feet in the house, because his kids can look at it, his wife looks at it. He says, these are the feet that has brought us everything that we have here. And it's a reflection of, I suppose, the character. I mean, somebody would have had a picture of maybe winning a trophy, but no, Ibrahimovic has his dirty, big, size 15 feet. But it means a lot because it signifies why they are so wealthy, the family. So fantastic, massive hero. And it's a sad day for world football. But thank you for the memories, Ibra.
Wonderfully said, Ayub. Wonderfully said. No, you're absolutely right. And I just wonder, you said if you could be anyone, I don't know what exact line you used, but you said if you could be anyone in football, you'd be Ibrahimovic. And I just wonder whether that's to do with your initial few comments about him being a wonderful physical specimen of a man. To be honest with me, yeah, exactly. After I didn't hear anything else after that. But no, you're absolutely
steady on.
steady on. It's a daytime show. No, look, unbelievable footballer. And you're right. I think you started at the right point, where when we often think about Zlatan Ibrahimovic, we think about the fact that he played in an era where, perhaps to your point, he's probably a little underappreciated for, given the fact that there were also two absolute monsters in his time, with Messi and Ronaldo achieving incredible numbers, Ballon d'Ors, league titles, Champions League winners, and that sometimes dims the light of others, doesn't it? Even when you don't really intend that to be the case. That sport at any level, at the highest level, when you have, whether it's a Federer, Nadal, or Djokovic in tennis, or in the snooker days, Stephen Hendry, Ronnie, there's always, you lose. In a sense, you raise or you talk about the virtues of one, unfortunately, often dims the light of others. So, but no, incredible player. I think I've got the statistics here. He scored, where is it? 511 goals in 866 games in all competitions. I think 52 goals for Sweden across 122 caps. So just less than a goal every 2 games. To your point, I think he's won, I counted 12 domestic titles, although there seems to be some contradiction in the internet, but I counted 12. That's even after removing the 2 that he won with Juventus that were removed there afterwards for that kind of controversy, that financial investigation, that those titles were then revoked. But look, only player to have scored in the Champions League with 6 different clubs. To your point, he's played for the absolute best of the best. Spent 4 years in PSG, where he was pretty much a goal a game, just under. Incredible. Just in terms of domestic titles, he's won. Everywhere he's gone, he's scored goals. Incredible shot on him. Lethal from about 12, 15, 18, 21 yards. Free kicks. Incredible right foot. You mentioned about one of his great strengths about understanding when to kind of stop. Sometimes the best movement is no movement. None more so evident than the 2017 EFL Cup final when they beat Southampton 3-2. Manchester United did. He scores an incredible free kick to put them 1-0. And after Jesse Lingard's doubled the lead, and then Gabbiadini, blast from the past, makes it 2-2. He scores an incredible header where, and what I mean by incredible is, it's just, if you watch it so carefully, when Herrera crosses the ball in, it's like he's always in the position that he needed to be in to get that header in, to your point. Not incredible movement, just knew where to be, where to pause, and he put the sitter away to deliver a title for United. United fans absolutely loved him. I think he scored something like 29 in 53 or something for Manchester. Again, scored goals everywhere he went. I don't know if you watched the farewell tribute at the San Siro, but incredibly emotional scenes. It often is when you're playing Hans Zimmer, the Gladiator soundtrack in the background. Now we are free. That always that's got 100% success rate in terms of kind of evoking tears from the fans. But I thought
I've not watched it, but I will do. I mean, I knew there was some sort of celebration, but I'll watch it maybe later after this show.
No, incredible scenes. Really, genuinely, it was beautifully done. You've got the kind of MC, let's say, bringing him out to Zlatan and the crowd shouting Ibrahimovic. All the players are there clapping him. He gives a wonderfully nice speech. He opens up by saying, "The first time I came to Milan, you gave me happiness. The second time I came to Milan, you gave me love." It's just, I mean, it was beautiful.
That's Ibra.
That's Ibra. He
Yeah.
didn't say in English. It was Italian, obviously, but it translated well nonetheless. But no, really done well by AC Milan. Paolo Maldini was there as well, the technical director. But yeah, it's superb. And I think you're right.
He's not there now, is he?
Yeah, I think there were some rumours that
Yeah.
he was going to be unfortunately relieved of his duties. But yeah, really done well. Scored everywhere he went. Incredible player. You're right about the Champions League, but in the end, that should not diminish in a sense from his overall success. And you're right in terms of the charisma. Has there been a more charismatic player? Many Manchester United fans will remember the interview he was giving to, I think it was Thierry Henry for Sky Sports, and Paul Pogba walks in. Just incredibly funny dialogue. I'd encourage anyone to go check that out.
I remember, yeah.
The couple that I think about is ahead of the 2014 World Cup qualifying playoffs. He says to the reporter, "Only God knows which team's going to go through." And the reporter responds by saying, "Well, it's a bit hard to ask him." And Zlatan says, "You're talking to him." So it's just some, and most of them were like not even like cringeworthy. They're just like so funny. They always make you laugh. And obviously, the other famous one when Wenger was in charge of Arsenal, when Ibra was quite young actually at the time, and offered him a trial, and he said, "Zlatan doesn't do auditions." So yeah, I mean there were so many, and he's just incredibly funny. I don't think. I mean, we don't know the guy, so it's hard to say in a fair and objective way. I don't necessarily think he's arrogant in that sense. I think he's just actually loves being a bit funny.
I think there's an element of tongue in cheek, but there's a tremendous self-belief. I mean, you don't achieve the successes that he has without having that self-belief. And I suppose arrogance isn't necessarily a bad thing. We always associate arrogance with a bad thing, but I think in sports sometimes, I think it's a quality, because it perhaps it intimidates the opposition. If you're arrogant, if you genuinely believe that you are better than your opposition, then it's a good thing. So I think in sports, I always make a differentiation that arrogance, it can be a quality, but a tremendous character. And I think there was times where it's tongue in cheek, but he didn't suffer fools gladly. I think if you look at his background, I suppose with many footballers, perhaps their upbringing was maybe single parents. It was rough neighborhoods. I think he grew up in quite a deprived area of Sweden. He was a child of immigrants. So and he talks about that. He does talk about that at that time. There was maybe, I suppose, the fact that he was quite a physical specimen, that it may be something that perhaps people sort of chose not to pick on him, but certainly he's aware that he had slight disadvantages, and he almost sort of seems his career has been right, I'm going to prove them wrong, or it's a challenge that I'm going to overcome. But wonderful. There's only one blip that I forgot to mention in his career. My take on leagues. He did the cardinal sin of going to LA Galaxy. So I'd like to erase that from his record, even though he did fantastically well there. That's the only bit. But thankfully, I think he saw sense and he said, "No, I've got to finish my career at a proper league." And he went to AC Milan. So apart from that, an impeccable career.
I'll just start drafting the topics for the next for the next agenda. Lionel Messi agrees move to Inter Miami. Let's discuss that.
Oh yeah. It's he's on my hit list as well.
I'm sure he is. Anyway, but no, absolutely well summarized. Incredible player. And to be honest with you, just one final comment. I think when players that you've in a sense lived through in parallel, it always leaves a little, for those who love football, it always leaves you a little emotional that these players retire. Because I remember when he scored that incredible solo goal at Ajax. You've seen the player literally go from being a prodigy all the way through to kind of 500 plus goals and an incredible career, 24 years. So there is always a little sense of an emotion that's kind of inside the way you think about, wow, these players we've literally seen their whole career. But anyway, incredible player. I'm sure he will do lots of fun things in retirement and hopefully stay within football. Right, Ayub, moving on to, well, it's the big one. It is the big one. The game that will ultimately prove whether Yaya Touré's curse was actually lifted or whether we will have to wait another season of hearing you say, no, but this time it's true, but this time it's true. No, we've got the Champions League final, the final game of the footballing season, as it should be, the showpiece final, Inter Milan against Manchester City. Manchester City returned to the Champions League final stage 2 years after losing to Chelsea 1-0. Kai Havertz, which I'm sure your son will have enjoyed. Obviously, it's been some season for Manchester City. They've obviously got Inter Milan in the final. A finalist that will surprise many. How do you see A, the game, and B, just in terms of the context of, I guess, legacy that's ultimately on the line, I guess, for both teams?
All right, I mean, firstly, I hope what I've been prophesizing does come true, and I'm still confident. I'm very, very confident. I think it's been an incredible season for Manchester City. They've whatever challenges, if there have been any challenges that they've been faced with, they've overcome with ease. I mean, we obviously talked about the Premier League. We looked at the journey in the Premier League. They were always chasing, but really when they had the opportunity, bang, they didn't falter. The game at the weekend as well against it's against I won't sort of say bitter rivals, but it's obviously it's a rivalry from 50, 60, 70, 80 years, ever since the two clubs have been playing professional football. But again, it was a professional display. It wasn't Man City at their absolute sublime best, but they did the job. And I think that's the mode that they're in at this moment in time. If they need to blow sides away, if you give them freedom, they'll absolutely blow you off the park. If it's going to be a tight, tense battle, which Inter Milan, I think I read somewhere that they've got 5 or 6 clean sheets. They are very difficult to break down. So it's probably going to be a tough ask. I think Inter will probably have a strategy that, right, we're going to make it difficult and maybe counter. But I think Man City, the way they're playing, the way that Pep's got everybody in the same direction. I think the confidence is supremely high of each individual. They've got match winners everywhere. So I just cannot see, no matter how much Inter Milan, I think, look at maybe, I suppose, disrupting Manchester City. There's just too much quality, too much class. So I'm sticking to my guns. The curse has been lifted by Yaya Toure. The Champions League will be going to Manchester. So I'm quite confident of that.
And we'll tell. We may need to shoot another episode come Saturday night if it goes the other way, just due to popular demand, just to see your reaction. No, look, Champions League final, it is the creme de la creme. There's something about that game. It's one of the few. I mean, my personal consumption of football. Normally, I don't watch many previews. I normally kind of log in if I'm watching or tune in, let's say, kind of just as the game's about to start, because that's just the way I like to. A Champions League final, however, I don't know, for some reason I just like to see the whole thing. I like to see the players leaving the hotel. I like to see the players kind of getting onto the coach for their trip to the stadium. I remember watching the Liverpool Spurs one at the I think pretty sure it was at the Wanda Metropolitano, the Atletico Madrid new stadium. And just remember watching the coaches arrive, and obviously that was a little different. You've got two English teams contesting the final, but there's just something magical about it. It feels like there's a sense of theatre. It's just like the World Cup final. It's the most important game of football that a professional footballer can play in the end, when you think about it, at kind of club level. Especially at European football, which is seen as the absolute heartbeat of world football in terms of these standards. So it's the biggest game. It's obviously a legacy game, but I think for both teams, in some ways, Inter Milan will. I mean, they just on Inter Milan, they finished 18 points behind Napoli. Napoli won the Serie A title. They are 7-1 underdogs. So it's quite the disparity. I think I saw the odds. City were 5-2 on, but in terms of their pedigree, I think they came incredibly close to winning Serie A last year, finishing 2 points behind AC Milan. They've won the last two Coppa Italias. Simone Inzaghi, their coach, has won the last 7 cup finals that he's contested. So the last two Coppa Italias were against Juventus, where they prevailed 4-2, and they also beat the Fiorentina, the Europa Conference League finalists, this season as well. So they've got some pedigree. They know how to handle occasions, or at least he does, in terms of the different teams that he's coached. Obviously, previously having coached Lazio as well. So he's been there 2 years. They've got some incredible players. If you look at, I mean, they're probably going to line up in a 3-5-2 formation, but if you look at some of the players that they've got, Barella, who played incredibly well for Italy during that run in the Euros. Zeko and Martinez will probably start up front. Onana, Dumfries. They know how to play. They'll feel confident in their system. They'll feel confident in one another. They'll be well drilled. I do expect them to be relatively well organized. And when you've got Zeko and Martinez up front, which is probably how they're going to start, you do feel like if they could make life a little difficult for City. The question is, can they get up the pitch consistently enough to cause City problems? And you're absolutely right about City in terms of just match winners kind of everywhere. So I think Inter won't be. I'd be surprised if they kind of, if they freeze in the moment. They've come through a group that was with Bayern and Barcelona, so they've come second in that group, and then they've come through, yes, the slightly easier part of the draw. They overcame Porto in a narrow round 16 win, 1-0 on aggregate. They've then beaten Benfica 3-3, and then I think it was the first leg was 2-0, the second leg was 3-3, overcoming them 5-3, and then obviously beating their rivals AC Milan 3-0 on aggregate in the semi-finals. But it's a different path to what obviously Man City have had to kind of overcome in beating Real Madrid, and obviously the difficult game they had before that with Bayern Munich as well. So, look, I think Inter Milan, I do expect them to be well drilled. You don't get to the final by fluke. It just does not happen, not at this level. Moving on to Manchester City, it's a football that, at least in my time, I've not seen Man City play like this for quite some time. Again, they've been more free flowing, which has perhaps left the door open at the back at times as well for quick teams. I just think right now it's just this perfect mix. We keep the ball, we knock it around, we move into spots that you don't want to get into. We give you these issues where your midfield players are having to track wide, and then Stones comes into the middle and he's got gaps. It's just Rodri, Gundogan, and Stones are playing that midfield right now superbly well. De Bruyne is picking up his positions. It's just going to be an incredible game. I think Man City are favourites for the right reasons. I mean, look, they've won the Premier League title again, 5 in 6 years. They've won the FA Cup, going for a treble, first time in this country since 1999, famously. And more and more as we've got closer to the game, I felt incredibly confident City would do it. The more and more I've got closer to the game and done obviously a little bit more research and reading on Inter Milan, I kind of expect it to be a tight game, just because something what you said last when we were reviewing the FA Cup, just about the fact that the stakes are so high that it just tends to not dampen the performance, but there's just, you play with, I want to say a handbrake on, but there's a certain risk-averse nature that sometimes can appear in finals because everything's so absolute and there are no second chances. So I expect it to be actually another tight game with City to dominate the ball because they are the better team. I think you cannot dispute that. But I don't think Inter Milan are to be taken lightly. And I think in a cup final, you're talking set pieces, free kicks on the edge of the box, different situations. Key player gets a yellow card early doors, and it's just various different things can happen which can affect the momentum of a game. So, I mean, I am looking forward to it. I think City will prevail in the end. I normally pick the better team, and the better team is Manchester City. I don't think there's any dispute about that. So, should be a fantastic, fantastic game. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something over the last week. Well, I just feel like it's going to be much tighter than perhaps even I thought.
No, you're absolutely right. It will be tight because I think, especially for City as well and Guardiola, this is the one thing that he's been craving for. It's been 10 years, 11 years since he's won a Champions League. So the stakes are incredibly high. I think the players as well, Manchester City players, they've those who've been there for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, they've not won the Champions League with what is probably, arguably, the best club side in the world. So it's certainly not going to be, I think, free flowing. It's important, I think, from a Manchester City point of view, that they score the first goal. I think it's imperative because uh, the one anomaly was the 3-3 for Inter Milan. I think other results were, I think they have had a number of clean sheets. I think, as I said, the 3-3 was the exception. Generally, they are extremely tight, and I've got a feeling that their mindset must be right. We'll keep it tight, make it difficult for City to have space. I mean, in a sense, they might just say, right, middle of the park, that's yours. But as soon as it comes into the final third, we'll be really, really compact. So if Inter score, I think it will be even more difficult to break them down because I think they're certainly not going to play expansive. I think they'll leave spaces in where they consider to be less danger. I hope City, and I'm pretty confident they will do. I don't think they're going to be gung ho where they're going to be out of the traps and just bomb forward. I think it was the same with, I mean, I suppose with Manchester United, they were quite aggressive, but it was measured. I think this game's going to be tight. Certainly, they're not going to have the space. But the ace up the sleeve again, I think, will be John Stones because it's almost a position of he has freedom because he's not, I suppose, considered the danger man. And he's somebody that seems to be growing in confidence week on week. The more he gets used to that particular role, because I mean, I on the last one, I think I commented on, I'd love to have seen his heat map. I did actually try and look for his heat map because he seemed to be everywhere. And I almost again think that the player that's perhaps going to be influential will be John Stones again in this game because De Bruyne, Inter Milan know exactly what dangers he brings. So they're going to have an eye on him. Silva, Grealish, all of these players, Haaland, these are all players that they're not going to be given or afforded space and time. I think with John Stones, maybe I suppose they've done their due diligence. They know that he could be. But again, psychologically, you think John Stones, he's not going to hurt you, is he? And I hope that's the mindset that the Inter Milan team have, because I think he will be again pivotal. John Stones will be quite an important player. But I just hope it's even if it's not a classic, I think it's just I love watching good quality football. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I think the Real Madrid game at the Bernabeu was just unbelievable. I mean, it was a pure joy to watch that game. I hope this is of a high standard, even if it's a cagey affair. I hope it's players playing to a high quality. If it's a defensive game, they're playing to a high defensive standard. But ultimately, if quality will tell, then it's going to be Manchester City, and I hope it is because I just want the best team in the world to be winning the best club trophy in the world. It's just and it will be a fitting finale to an unbelievable season. And I think thereafter we've got to give, or certainly people like me who perhaps question how great Guardiola is, we've got to give him the respect.
Don't worry, we will get to that on a couple of episodes from now where I may be bringing the fire, let's say. No, I think you've covered it. You've made some good points there, especially with regards to Inter Milan in terms of their defensive prowess. You're right. 5 of the 6 knockout games against Benfica, Porto, and AC Milan, they kept clean sheets. So you're right. The 3-3 game was a little bit of an anomaly, and I think that was in the second leg when, I think Benfica had to kind of chase it a little bit, and therefore probably the game was won in the first leg. I think that's how it broke down. So 5 out of 6. I think obviously Inter have got a few question marks over some players back in Korea. Mkhitaryan's back. Skriniar, let's see, he should be back as well. I think he was on the bench against Torino at the weekend, but. Yeah, look, I agree with you. The interesting thing, I think, for a lot of observers will be, and I think this time he's going to play the team that we all expect. There's been this kind of accusation leveled against Pep Guardiola that at times he has outthought himself in big moments in Champions League. And I do think there's some fair value to that. it's a Champions League final against Chelsea, a team that knows you well 2 years ago, and you choose not to play Rodri, who'd had quite the impact on your team that season, not to play a defensive midfielder who was playing well. I could understand the logic because he was thinking he wanted to get as many ball players as possible to kind of negate Chelsea's back five or their system generally to get extra ball players on. But I think in a final, I'm not taking that chance. I'm just not. I want someone who's going to be a little bit more defensive minded, let's say, or whose natural instincts are to be kind of defensive minded. But yeah, I think the team picks itself for Manchester City. They're all healthy. I think it's going to be Edison, Walker, Diaz, Akanji at the back. It's going to be Stones, Rodri. In front of them is going to be Grealish, Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne, and 95% it's going to be Bernardo Silva instead of Mahrez, and obviously the big man Erling Haaland up front. That team picks itself. Let's be honest. It will be that. Do I see him maybe opting for Mahrez instead of Bernardo? I don't. I think he's going to go with Bernardo, the extra kind of control, let's say, even though Mahrez is perhaps a little bit more not threatening, but maybe perhaps a little bit more direct in terms of his dribbling. I think he's a great impact sub.
Absolutely.
To bring on in the second half of the game, depending on how the game is flowing. A big legacy game. You mentioned it for Pep. Obviously, after those two Champions League triumphs at Barcelona, this is the one he wants at Man City. They've been the dominant force in European football. I think that's still fair to say over the last. I say dominant, I'll take that back. Or at least they've been the best team for the last 3-4 years. They've just not had this title to kind of show for it. And this is their time. They have to. Big game for Kevin De Bruyne. We know what he represents in terms of the Premier League, but he's going to want to get his hands on this trophy. And a man of his ilk and pedigree and experience, you'd like to think he's going to leave his imprint on this game. An incredible, incredible player to watch. So yeah, it's going to be a fascinating game. I'll ask you for a prediction first. What do you think?
It will be tight. 2-1. I'll go 2-1 for City, obviously. Just in case anybody was in any doubt.
Yeah, I'm gonna go City 2-0. I'm gonna go City 2-0. Yeah, it's a difficult one. These games, it does something. It does something to some players, like sometimes weird things happen, momentum, and yeah, it's just a really fascinating game. I remember in the Chelsea game against City, in the second half after De Bruyne went out, Chelsea disrupted their rhythm in such a way that second half flew by, so disjointed, free kicks, fouls, throw-ins, it just never got into any rhythm for City to be able to kind of pile the pressure on as you would normally expect a Man City team to do. And Chelsea, I won't say were comfortable, but it was the kind of game that they needed, if that makes sense, to win that game. But I'm going to go City 2-0. I think it'll be tight, but again, I don't overthink these things. I think the better team will prevail. So it should be good. Any last thoughts on the big game? I imagine you'll be watching it on your own or family, friends. How are you going to watch it?
It will be. I'll be in the room if the family are there. Great. If they're not, then yeah, it doesn't really matter. No, it will be the family because I mean, I'm really, really excited about it because it as I said, I love to watch quality football, high quality football, and it doesn't get any bigger than this. Plus, I suppose I've been sort of saying about the curse being lifted, so I've got a vested interest in this game. So let's hope for the best.
Well, my sister, in her infinite wisdom, has held a barbecue on Saturday at her house, so I shall be attending. It will be rude not to. That and the fact I don't think there'll be any dinner at home, but I'll be attending, and I'll be probably watching the game at hers. But yeah, looking forward to it. It should be an incredible game watching with some family members. Should be a fun experience. Right, good stuff. I think that's a wrap, Ayub. We've covered a lot there. I think there was a lot to cover, so that's good. We'll be hopefully recording again after the weekend's events. Obviously, the big game Saturday night, so we'll be reviewing that hopefully Monday or Tuesday. Will Manchester City finally get their hands on the Champions League trophy that they've long coveted, or will Inter Milan win and spring the upset? And you make sure you attend if that happens, because if Badge isn't there, I'm not doing a monologue. So
no, if that's the case, if Inter do pull off a shot win, I'm looking for Yaya Toure. I'm hunting the man down.
He might still be at Declan Rice's house. No, brilliant, good stuff. Well, okay, well that's a wrap. Like I said, we'll be recording again after the weekend to review this big game. And if in the event that Manchester City do prevail, we'll be talking about what that means for some of the legacies of some of the big characters and names involved. Just before we sign off, again, a gentle reminder, if you haven't subscribed already to the channel, please do so. Give the episode a like, drop a comment. Will Manchester City win? It's the big one. They've put themselves in this position again. Surely this is their time. What are your thoughts? Drop a few predictions. Give us your thoughts on the game. And yeah, until the very next episode, we shall hopefully see you then. Goodbye.